While working at Staatsburgh, a project that I have really enjoyed was researching the servants who worked for the Mills family. The research that I've done has made these individuals come alive to me, and I'm fascinated every time I find a new piece of evidence telling me more about their lives and circumstances. Some of this research led to a great exhibit entitled In the Service of Perfection, Staatsburgh's Elite Servants, which can be seen behind me. It takes a closer look at 6 of the Mills' senior staff. We also have a theme tour of the house that focuses on the experiences of the servants. But the purpose of this video is to delve deeper into the research, beyond what we can share in an exhibit or on a tour. The butler was the subject of the first video of this series, and today I would like to talk about a footman who worked for the Mills family and also married the butler's daughter. The position of footman worked closely with the butler to support him as he ran the household. Footmen would plate food, serve dinner and drinks, admit and announce guests, assisting in any tasks the butler directed. Looks mattered when it came to footmen. They would always be wearing distinctive livery, and footmen were expected to be young, handsome, and tall. Many footmen served with the goal of eventually being promoted to valet or butler. One of the young footmen that was hired to work for the Mills family was Herbert Stride, a native of Dorset, England. He was born in 1883, the same year as the Mills' twin daughters, and immigrated to the United States in 1903. The ship that he took to the U.S. when he was just 20 years old also carried Frederick Thompson, the Mills' butler, and his wife. The manifest indicated that all 3 were heading to the Mills' New York City address. We don't know how Stride and Thompson first connected, but it seems likely that Thompson hired him in Europe and brought him to work for him and the Mills family. Stride had several characteristics that made him an ideal footman. He was tall, 6'2½", young, and handsome. In the 1905 New York State Census, Stride is listed as one of 3 footmen in the Mills' New York City house, but he did travel between homes, and this example of a footman's bedroom at Staatsburgh may have been his bedroom. He worked for the Mills family for over 6 years, and it was during this time that he must have fallen in love with young Daisy Thompson, the daughter of the Mills' butler, Frederick Thompson. They married on a Thursday afternoon in January 1909 at St. James Church on Madison Avenue, and they were married by Bishop Frederick Courtney and had a reception at the Plaza Assembly Rooms. It was just 1 week before Beatrice Mills married the Earl of Granard. This newspaper article detailed the wedding and showcased a photo of Daisy. The entire Mills family attended the wedding, as well as the Mills' household staff. One wonders about Daisy's life as the daughter of a butler. It was different, certainly, from a young lady that would have been working in service, but also much different from the Mills' daughters. I found an article that mentions her attendance at a ball hosted by the Newport Cricket Club in 1907. The Newport Cricket Club was a social organization that was primarily composed of butlers and valets of the 400. The elite. Perhaps Herbert also attended the ball. Given her social circle, it is not hard to believe that Daisy married a footman who worked under her father. Herbert likely had ambitions to rise the ranks from footman to butler, and a newspaper article in a Poughkeepsie paper mentioned that Herbert Stride was hired by the Dinsmore family as butler at the Locusts in September 1909. The Dinsmore estate was directly north of the Mills' estate in Staatsburgh. I could not find any other evidence of his work for the Dinsmore family, or how long he worked for them, But in 1912, he filed paperwork to become a citizen and listed his residence as Staatsburgh and his occupation as butler. He did not work for the Dinsmores very long, because by the late 19-teens, he was working as butler for Emily Vanderbilt Sloane. Her first husband, William D. Sloane, died in 1915. She remarried widower and diplomat Henry White in 1920. She was the daughter of William Henry Vanderbilt and sister to William K., George, and our Hyde Park neighbor Frederick Vanderbilt. Even after Herbert and Daisy moved on and started working for Emily Vanderbilt Sloane White, they remained in close contact with Frederick Thompson. Having the same profession, Frederick and Herbert were both part of a butlers organization that formed in 1918 in response to World War I and President Hoover's food economy campaign. The butlers joined together to implement food conservation plans in the wealthiest homes in order to set an example for less wealthy homes. Stride worked for Emily Vanderbilt Sloane White even after she was widowed a second time in 1927. Like the Mills family, she had several residences. Her last home in New York City was at 854 Fifth Avenue, and she purchased it in 1925. It was less than 3 blocks from the Millses' home in New York City. However, unlike the Millses' home, this one survived. Today, it stands out as a reminder of an earlier era between much taller buildings. However, it is still as opulent as it was when Mrs. White lived there. When she died, her estate sold it to the Republic of Yugoslavia in 1946, and after Yugoslavia dissolved, it housed the Serbian mission to the United Nations before being placed for sale in 2017 for $50 million. The real estate photos reveal truly breathtaking interiors. Her summer home in Lenox, Massachusetts was equally as breathtaking. Elm Court was designed by Peabody and Stearns with a landscape by Frederick Law Olmsted. The Sloanes commissioned the shingle-style home in 1886 and added on until it was 90 rooms. The property was run as an inn for many years after Mrs. White died, and in 2020 is set to be restored and turned into a high-end resort. Herbert and Daisy would have spent a lot of time running this estate. It appears Daisy worked alongside Herbert because in the 1930 census, they are listed in Emily White's home as butler and secretary. Several newspapers over the years reported that she supervised the seasonal openings and closings of Elm Court. They likely retired in the early 1940s, as Daisy passed away from pneumonia in 1944 and Mrs. White passed away in 1946. Though it had been over half a century since he worked here, we know Herbert Stride visited Staatsburgh in 1963, long after he had retired from service, and he donated a few items to the site. He donated a photograph of the carriage barn in Butler's house and a couple photographs of the Millses' grandchildren. Corresponding with staff, he wrote, "Staatsburgh always brings back pleasant memories to me." Another important component of Stride's life was his home in Newport. We might remember from the Butler video that Mrs. Stride's parents, Frederick and Eveline Thompson, purchased a home on Rhode Island Avenue in Newport in 1928. Frederick died in 1929, but then Eveline purchased another, larger home on Gibbs Avenue in 1930. The Queen Anne-style house had been built in 1895 and had gardens designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. When she originally purchased the home, it was called Brent Lodge, but they soon changed the name to Everdy, which reflected their own names. Everdy was big enough that the Thompson and Stride families had a staff and employed servants to help run their household. Mrs. Thompson, Stride's mother-in-law, lived at Everdie until her death in 1949. She was very active in many civic groups. This newspaper article described how she headed a group of knitters working on behalf of the British War Relief Society. Everdie was also the residence of Herbert and Daisy. And this 1937 article proclaimed them and Everdie the winners of the Newport Chamber of Commerce Christmas Home Lighting Contest. Herbert Stride died at age 87 in 1970 and used his estate to fund the Herbert and Daisy Stride Memorial Foundation, which he had had the foresight to create 11 years earlier. Amazingly, Stride's estate was over $1.5 million. We usually don't think of servants or those with a career in service having that much money, but he likely saved and invested very smartly. The newspaper said that the fortune began with a gift from an employer and swelled after he made wise investments with tips from his employers. But that's a story we have heard enough times to wonder if it's actually true. Though Stride did receive $10,000 from Henry White's will and $20,000 from Emily Sloane White. The foundation's purpose was to support medical education in Newport. The original plan for Everdie was to turn it into an educational center, but by that time Newport Hospital had opened up a new building with a substantial medical library, and so it was seen as impractical, and the foundation sold Everdie in 1974. The property was divided into condos for many years, but in the 1990s, it was purchased by Vin DeBona, a producer for America's Funniest Home Videos. A 2018 article in Rhode Island Monthly described his work restoring the property and the Olmsted-designed gardens. The foundation has distributed many grants to medical and nursing schools, and especially the Newport Hospital. The foundation's work continues today, and with it, Herbert Stride's legacy, a legacy that is physically remembered by the portraits of Herbert and Daisy that can be seen by anyone who walks into the main lobby of the Newport Hospital.